And it's Sally Bryant with you on a Tuesday morning, covering the whole of the interior of New South Wales this morning. It's 9:25.
ABC Radio, it's yours.
Yours for live grandstand sport.
Yours for the latest on your local team.
Yours, win, lose or draw.
ABC Radio.
Now, it's been one of those years, particularly in terms of online security concerns. Let's think back. Well, you don't need to think back all that far. You've got concerns like Optus and Medibank and all those other dodgy things, all those phone calls that you've been getting purporting to be, I don't know, from the tax office or whoever. How well protected are you personally when it comes to your tech, to your equipment? Could you, for example, tell if your phone had been hacked? Joining me this morning is Matt Dickerson. He is a tech aficionado and he's so up to date with this stuff. He actually hosts his own podcast. Matthew Dickerson, good morning.
Good morning, Sally. Great to be chatting to you.
Lovely to catch up with you again. Matthew, how can people hack my phone?
Well, there's a range of ways they can do it, and it is an entirely new vocabulary. So you've got phishing, smishing, vishing, malware, spyware, scareware, ransomware. The list goes on of different terms that tech experts keep creating for all these different things that people are doing. And there's things that you might do that you are somewhat conscious of what you're doing. So, for example, you might be looking for a new app. You talk to a friend and they had this great app and you thought, I'll go and look for that. And you find a few different apps. And if you're not really paying attention to what you're doing, you might actually just go and download a malicious app. When you look for apps these days, I actually say to people, make sure that when you're about to download an app, just go and search for the exact name, exactly as it's written, and just read a few reviews. Just check that this is the actual app that you think it might be, because there's very clever social engineering that some of these bad organisations go out and do. And so they'll sometimes create an app that sounds just like that really popular app, but of course it's not quite the same. And you actually just download that malicious software, which is inviting people to come into your home. It's like opening the front door of your house and saying to burglars, come on in, I'm ready to be robbed. So that's one way that we get some sort of problem software on our phones. Clicking on a suspicious...
So can I just ask, if I go to the app store of, the provider, is that a guaranteed safe place to get apps from?
Usually they're pretty safe, but it's not guaranteed. If they pick up any apps that are any sort of malware, any sort of malicious app, they'll remove them from those stores pretty quickly. But, gee, there's so many apps out there. There's over 1 million apps on the App Store, for example. It's hard for them to be on top of every new one that pops up. So, and one of the things obviously that I would recommend is don't go through a third-party process. You want to go through the normal Google Play Store or the Apple Store to get those apps. So that gives you some sort of certainty, but it's not guaranteed, because I could, not that I'm doing this, of course, Sally, but I could put an app up there now and it might get away with being on there for hours or days, and that might be just the time that you go and download that app. So certainly it's something that you still want to be conscious of and make sure you're getting the right one. And you do see it sometimes when you go looking for an app. There are so many that sound similar, sound like the same name. Are you getting the correct one? Are you getting the one that you think is the right one? Even when you go and buy a new device and there's an app that's required with it, you go and search for that and you might see 3 or 4 that look about the same, but there's only the one that's actually the proper authorised device. So that's one way to get some sort of malware on your phone. But the most common way is clicking on a suspicious link. So you get, especially around this time of year, you get that text that says your parcel's about to arrive, or, oh no, your parcel's been held up at customs. Click on this link to go and free that through customs. And of course, you're desperately waiting on those deliveries to come. You've got presents for your kids or your partner or your friends. You want to make sure you get those deliveries. So of course, you click on that link and go and fill in the information that people are asking for. And that can do a whole range of things. And there's a whole range of different methodologies that hackers use to get information or get them something onto your phone. But clicking on those links is something that I am always conscious of saying to people. If you're thinking about clicking on that link, 9 out of 10 times don't do it, and the 10th time definitely don't do it. It's just one of those things that's just the easiest way. And you see things come out from the ATO, for example, who will say, we might send you some information, but we won't send you information and ask you to click on a link. We might send you information and say, go to our website, and then go via that method. And that's one of the things. If you get something from a transport carrier, for example, that says click on this link, then ignore that and go to the actual site of that particular carrier that you're using. If it sends you a code that says, here's your tracking number, and it might be a hyperlink, clicking on that hyperlink doesn't guarantee it's going to use that tracking number. So, for example, you can display one number, but behind that hyperlink can be a completely different website address altogether. So what you see and where it goes to may be two different locations. So you get some obvious ones when you see emails come through from a large multinational organisation and it's a Gmail address or a Hotmail address. You can probably work out those ones aren't going to be right. But text messaging, and that's where the term smishing comes from, which is a slight alteration of the term phishing. Text messages seem to be more trusted by people, so they seem to be more effective for hackers to get something onto your phone.
Matthew, in the worst case scenario that your phone has been hacked by somebody, are there things to look out for? Are there things to make you think, oh, I might have a problem here?
Yeah, you certainly mentioned a couple of them in your intro there. If your phone's losing charge quickly now, sure, as your phone gets older, the battery mightn't be quite as good. But if you went and got a new phone, for example, and 3 months later, you go, gee, I'm only getting to lunchtime and I've got to charge up my phone, that doesn't seem normal. That seems unusual. Therefore, there's probably something going on in the background that is using up that battery. Now, it could be something you've got running in the background, but it could also be a hacker doing things on your phone. If, for example, your phone's running slowly and not just browsing the web, but just opening up an app, it takes a while to do that. Why is that taking so long? That seems unusual. Opening up a photo and taking a photo, gee, that's slow at the moment. There might be some other activity going on in the background that you're not necessarily aware of. And then your data. Now, people have got usually some sort of data limit on their phone plan before it might slow down, for example, or some might have data limits before it cuts off or starts charging them extra. And you get a bit of an idea of how much data you normally use for a month. People use different amounts, obviously, but if suddenly you're using more data than normal, well, that means that from the outside world, there's someone that's accessing your phone more than it needs to be. So it's probably some sort of indication. Strange activity on your phone, strange apps popping up. When you look at your call log or your text log and you're seeing unusual numbers there, I don't remember calling those numbers yesterday. I wonder what happened then. I must have been very tired and made those phone calls. No, it might have been someone using your phone to spoof a number to then go out and try and infect more phones. So there are various indications of various signs. And I suppose, unfortunately, in this world we live in today, Sally, you've just got to be just a little bit suspicious of lots of things.
Yeah. So if that happens, if you discover your phone, well, you've got fairly sure your phone has been hacked, what do you do? How do you manage that?
Panic is the first thing that I normally take as a precaution. But after you get past that, then there's a few things, and there's a drastic step I'll mention in a moment. But just go and look for some apps that are on your phone, and if you don't recognise some of those apps, then delete them. If you're not using those apps, it doesn't really matter. Get rid of them and see if that helps improve it. There is some anti-malware software you can get now, which seems a bit of a shame that you've got to install software on your phone to try and stop some of this sort of thing happening. Obviously, the last and most drastic step is resetting your phone. Now, that's a bit of a pain, a bit of a hassle. You want to make sure you've got your contacts off, you get your photos off are the main things there. Reset your phone completely, then get the contacts and your photos back on the phone. But then all those little settings that you just had just right with your phone, the way the ringtone was, the various apps that you're using, the setting up of your bank app, all those things, you've got to go and do those again manually. Now, of course, you can back up your phone completely and then restore it after a reset. But if you've got something on your phone, then if you back it up, you're probably backing up that bit of malware. So then when you restore your phone, you're probably restoring that bit of malware. So even though normally if you're changing over from an old phone to a new phone, you'd back up and restore, when you're suspecting that you've got some malware on there, that's when you take that drastic step of keeping the important information and then doing a flush of it and then restoring it. Now, things that are cloud-connected apps, so for example, your social media sites, your banking sites, they're just a matter of installing those apps again and setting those up again. So it's a bit of a hassle, a bit of time, but it's the cleanest way to do it. One thing that's important, if you do suspect you've been hacked, I don't recommend changing passwords because the immediate reaction is, oh no, I might have been hacked. I'll go and change my passwords or my PIN on my banking app and my various social media sites. But if you've been hacked, you may actually be sending every keystroke that you make on your phone to someone else. So changing your password, you've just sent the new password to your banking app to someone else. So that's a dangerous thing. If you want to change some of those, do it from your computer, for example, if you want to change some of those passwords, or doing that reset on your phone. Then the first thing I do after a complete reset, when you set up those banking apps and those social media apps, that'd be the time to change your passwords.
I tell you what, it really is buyer beware, isn't it? You've got to be really savvy in the modern world. There's been a bit of chatter this week about CCTV and smart home devices being hacked. How do you protect yourself in the modern environment when there's so much of this stuff around?
One of the really important things with CCTV is a strong password. The most common way people get into your CCTV, and CCTV is a great theft deterrent, burglar deterrent on your house, and I've seen lots of examples where it's been utilised and it's fantastic, but many people get it. It's got the default password when you get it out of the box and start setting it up, and the default password might be password or default or something simple like that. And most people go, I'll get around to changing that, and they don't. So someone can really do one of two things. They can just do some IP address scans on the internet, so they could be anywhere in the world, and they just try the default passwords, and lo and behold, they get straight into your system. Again, you've almost like you've left the key to the front door sitting at the front door, and they just open the door and come on in. The other thing that people do is that for convenience sake, many CCTV systems now have Wi-Fi cameras. So rather than run a cable and plug that cable into a camera as you install it around your house, you use Wi-Fi. Very convenient, but again, if you don't have some sort of secure password on there, someone can sit near your house, connect to your Wi-Fi, and actually just look at your cameras. Now, that's a bit more obvious. If you see someone sitting at the front of your house and they've got a computer sitting on their lap and they're looking at your inside of your house, you might pick up on that. But it could just be your neighbours. It could be someone nearby. So that's one that you've got to be careful of. I personally prefer wired cameras rather than Wi-Fi cameras, but I do understand there's that extra bit of hassle about wiring your home to do that. So Wi-Fi cameras are fine, just make sure you're putting on a strong password, and if you are accessing it remotely, you might change that password regularly, and I know that's a pain because you've got so many passwords and so many different things to remember, but having some way of just changing that password, and really with a password you want to make it so that it's long enough. You want to put some other characters in there, an @ sign, a $sign, a slash, some of those sort of things, and a number, and make it like at least 8 characters, but I'd prefer to go 10 with some of those other characters in there. It just makes it harder for a brute force attack where they just try every combination.
Yeah. Matthew, before I let you go, how do you feel about smart home devices? Because they worry me. If there's something that you can communicate with, and speaking with someone earlier today saying that, you know, you can be having a conversation about something and the next thing you know, that stuff is turning up on your device. So something's listening to you.
Well, I've tried to experiment with this, and you mentioned my podcast earlier. We had some listeners who had actually sent in some questions along those lines. Is your phone listening to you? Is it really tapping into everything you're doing? So we tried some experiments, and for a week I went around the house, around the office, near my phone, and I kept mentioning wedding dress. There was no one in my life who was getting married at the time. There was no reason at all I should have any searches pop up with wedding dresses in them. And after a week, both myself and the other person I do the podcast with did exactly the same thing for a week, and no things popped up on our search results. Nothing randomly popped up. But what happens so many times with people is that if they're thinking about getting married, they might just type in a search on wedding dress just once, and then your computer learns, Google obviously learns, and then shares that information with various providers. And next thing you know, you do see these wedding dress ads pop up, and you think it's because you've been talking about it, but it only took you to type it in once. So I'm fairly confident that our phone isn't listening to us, that our phone is not sitting there saying, oh no, Matthew and Sally are talking about smartphone hacks. We better start giving them ads about anti-malware devices. Tell me if your phone does start popping up with any malware devices in the near future. But you might have done a search for this particular segment, for example, and that's all it takes. We forget about it when we've done it once or twice. But no, I'm pretty confident that no one's sitting there listening to our conversations and then automatically giving us pop-up ads.
Well, that's a relief, because some of the conversations, Matthew, that I have on my phone, I don't want anybody else listening to.
Fair enough.
Thanks so much for that great advice, and have a wonderful Christmas.
Well, thanks, Sally. Same to you.
Matthew Dickerson there. He is the Tech Talk dude, and he knows his way around, well, as it turns out, not only my phone, not only your phone, but his phone as well.